The town I arrived in was smaller than I expected. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew everyone else's secrets. Yet, as soon as I stepped off the dusty road and onto the farm that had called my name from a Craigslist listing, I felt like I had entered a world with rules I couldn't yet understand. The farm itself looked ordinary. Fields stretching into the horizon, a weathered barn at the far end, and the occasional dog bark in the distance. But the air carried a weight, a quiet insistence that something was watching. The caretaker, a man named Silas, handed me the keys without speaking. His eyes were a pale gray, too sharp for someone of his age, and he moved with an ease that suggested familiarity with things most people feared. "Don't let them out," he said simply. That was his only warning, his only explanation for what I was about to step into. I assumed he meant the livestock, the animals, and I nodded, though I didn't fully understand. The first night was quiet, or at least deceptively quiet. I walked the property, checking the fences and gates, making sure everything was secure. Every barn door, every latch, every lock seemed normal. Yet there was something in the way the shadows stretched across the fields, something deliberate in the way the wind barely moved the grass that put me on edge. The moon was bright, and I could see every detail of the barn, the animals within it, and the surrounding pastures. That's when I realized. The animals weren't locked in, not a single one. The chickens roamed freely, pecking at the grass. The goats stood near the edges of the barn. Even the dogs and horses were outside their usual enclosures, moving with a strange awareness. At first, I thought Silas had forgotten to lock them, but that didn't make sense. He had been taking care of this farm for decades. Mistakes like that didn't happen here. Then, I noticed movement closer to the barn. A shadow shifted where no animal should have been. I froze, my pulse quickening. The wind shifted, though the air itself felt still. The barn doors were open wide, creaking faintly, though no one had approached them. I swore I could hear breathing, soft and deliberate, echoing from the dark interior. I remembered Silas's words, "Don't let them out." I didn't understand at first, not until I walked closer and saw them all, standing perfectly still, staring at me with an intensity that no normal animal could sustain. Their heads tilted slightly, as though they were listening for something, anticipating my next move. The cows were closest. They didn't move as I approached, but their eyes tracked me, not with the curiosity of a herd, not with the randomness of animal behavior. No, they followed me as if they recognized me, as if they had been waiting. Each step I took, they mirrored, their attention almost human in its precision. I backed away slowly, careful not to break any invisible boundary I couldn't yet see. That's when I noticed the smallest of the goats, a scrawny creature with white fur and dirt-stained hooves, standing on top of the barn roof. It balanced there perfectly, its gaze fixed on me, unnaturally calm. Something was wrong. Everything was wrong. I could feel the farm breathing around me, pulsing like a living organism. Every fence, every field, every building was aligned to guide me somewhere, though I didn't know where. And all the animals, free and untethered, were silent witnesses, waiting for me to make a mistake. I finally found Silas in the barn, stacking hay bales with a deliberate slowness. He looked up at me and said nothing, just watched. "You let them out," I said, unsure if it was a question or an accusation. "They weren't ever locked," he replied softly. His eyes held a weight that I didn't understand. "What do you mean?" He shook his head. "Come morning, you'll understand why the locks don't exist. Until then, stay in the house, don't wander, and don't make noise." I left him there and walked the property once more. By now, the moon was high, and the shadows of the trees stretched long across the fields. Every animal was watching, every head turned slightly toward me. The dogs growled softly, but not at me. at the cow, at something beyond. I realized I wasn't just observing the animals, they were observing me. And the farm had rules just like every other place I had been in the past, but these rules weren't written down, they weren't explained, they were felt. Deep in my chest, in the pit of my stomach, I felt the law of this place. Obey and you survive, disobey and you vanish. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes and centuries at the same time. The moonlight shifted, the wind remained still, and the animals moved only slightly, subtly, as if coordinating among themselves. It was then I saw it, a single cow standing outside the barn, its eyes reflecting the moonlight with an intelligence I could not name. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't normal, this wasn't nature. I stepped closer, compelled despite every instinct screaming at me. The cow tilted its head, and I felt it watching not just me, but my thoughts, my fears, my intentions. I could almost hear a whisper in my mind, though I knew it wasn't coming from anywhere. Then, somewhere behind me, a fence rattled. I turned sharply, but no one was there. The chickens scattered briefly, the goats shuffled, and the dogs stiffened. Every single animal on the property was aware now, watching, waiting, judging. By the time I returned to the house, dawn was approaching, but the farm had already marked me. I didn't know how or why. I only knew that the rules were not for the animals, they were for me. And every step I had taken outside, every glance, every sound had been recorded by eyes that were not just alive, they were conscious, calculating, eternal. I spent the rest of the day inside the house, trying to make sense of what I had seen. The farm was quiet, deceptively calm, but the memory of those watching eyes burned in my mind. I didn't sleep that night, not truly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the animals standing free, their heads slowly turning toward me, their presence pressing in like a tide I could not resist. And then, just before midnight, I heard it, a low, soft murmur drifting from the barn. Not words, not language, just sound, patterned, deliberate. I knew instinctively that it was counting, watching, marking. And I knew deep down that if I stepped outside again, the farm would claim what it had been waiting for all this time. I didn't move. I stayed frozen, listening to the night breathe around me, understanding finally what Silas had meant. The animals weren't locked at night, not because someone forgot, not because the farm was careless, but because they never needed to be. They were already free, and I was already trapped.
The night deepened, heavier than the darkness I had ever experienced. The sky over Gray Hollow was clear, the stars sharp and cold, but down here on the farm, the air seemed to pulse, slow and deliberate, as if the land itself were breathing around me. Every shadow stretched longer, every rustle of grass became amplified, and I felt it, something unseen shifting closer, just beyond perception. I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were restless, looping over the farm, over the animals, over the quiet insistence that I had already broken an unspoken rule simply by existing on the property. My feet carried me outside, despite every instinct telling me to stay in the house. The front door creaked open into the night air, and I paused, listening. The silence was almost a presence in itself. The animals were everywhere, not confined, not grazing or moving as one would expect. They were stationary in their positions, yet alive with intention. The chickens pecked at nothing, the goats shifted in perfect unison, and the cows, my attention kept returning to them, stood tall and rigid, their eyes fixed on me, unblinking, calculating. The larger one, a mottled gray cow, stepped slowly forward, her gaze penetrating, assessing, aware. I remembered Silas's words from earlier, "Don't let them out." I thought I understood. I didn't. These animals weren't being kept in. They didn't need fences or locks. They were already free. And freedom here meant control, not liberation. I wandered closer to the barn, careful not to trigger whatever invisible boundaries existed. The doors were wide open, inviting, yet the darkness inside was heavier than it should have been. I could hear faint scratching sounds, slow and deliberate, as if someone or something was moving just out of sight. My heartbeat quickened. The temperature seemed to drop. I could see my breath, thick in the night air, and for a moment I felt trapped between this world and some other place I had no name for. Then I heard it, my name, whispered softly, in my own voice, carrying from the direction of the barn. It was subtle, almost melodic, repeating only once. My body froze. I remembered the second rule, never respond if the animals call your name. I didn't move. I didn't answer. The sound stopped. For hours, I walked the perimeter of the farm, constantly aware of the animals' presence. The dogs followed at a distance, low growls rumbling in their throats, but not at me, at something else, something beyond the veil of night. The horses' ears twitched, heads slowly lowering, observing, calculating. Even the goats, those normally chaotic little creatures, moved in synchronized precision, circling the open barn in patterns that made no sense unless the patterns were meant to teach, to warn, or to trap. I realized the farm itself was alive, not animate, not conscious in a human sense, but aware. It reacted to my movements, to my choices, to the mere fact that I was there. Every step I took, every shadow I passed under was noted, measured, judged, and the animals were the eyes, the silent witnesses that carried out the farm's will. The longer I stayed, the more I felt the rules pressing against me. I had broken them before, unintentionally, and each break had consequences, subtle at first, escalating in intensity. My sleep, my mind, my sense of safety, all eroding under the pressure of the unseen presence that guided the animals' actions. At precisely 2:17 a.m., the world changed. Time seemed to pause. The wind ceased. The trees froze mid-sway. Every animal on the property stopped moving. Even the small birds resting on the fences became statues. The silence was absolute, oppressive. I could feel their attention coiling around me like a predator waiting to strike. A sound came from the barn then. Not loud, not violent, but deliberate, measured. It was a breathing, but wrong. Not animal, not human, somewhere in between. I knew immediately that I was being observed, not just by the animals, but by whatever had taken residence inside that barn long before I arrived. My limbs felt heavy, my thoughts sluggish, but I forced myself toward the source. Each step I took was mirrored in the shadows around me. The cow had moved closer, blocking the path back to the house. I could see her eyes glow faintly in the moonlight, reflecting something I did not understand. The dogs and horses flanked me now, silent, motionless, yet undeniably aware. The goats moved higher, climbing structures, balancing on roof beams, their eyes locked on me, unwavering. Inside the barn, the air was thick. It smelled metallic, damp, and alive. Shapes shifted just beyond my vision, impossible forms that suggested human and animal simultaneously, yet neither. A soft whisper threaded through the silence, and my name was called again, this time more insistent, more intimate. I did not respond. I could not. Then I understood. This was no ordinary farm. The animals were free because they had a purpose. They were guardians, observers, enforcers, and I, by wandering and ignoring the rules, had become their quarry. Every movement, every glance, every breath I had taken outside had been noted, logged, cataloged. The farm didn't need fences. It didn't need locks. I was already trapped.
The cow stepped closer. My instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs refused to move. The shapes in the barn moved subtly, circling, closing in, synchronized with the animals outside. The whispering grew, echoing in my mind, in a rhythm I could not comprehend, telling me, warning me, deciding my fate. I backed away, slowly, carefully, until I could no longer see the house. I was surrounded. The moon cast shadows that did not belong to the objects creating them. Every heartbeat felt like a drum. Every rustle of grass sounded like footsteps. I realized I was walking a path determined by the farm, a ritual I didn't know I was participating in. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. The night stretched indefinitely. The shadows seemed to breathe, the animals' eyes gleaming, reflecting some unseen intelligence. The barn doors creaked. Then a single sound rose from within that structure, a sound that was deliberate, familiar, and wrong. It was not the sound of an animal. It was not human. It was something else entirely, and I knew immediately, without thinking, that I was no longer an observer. I had become part of it.
The night had stretched into something timeless, the kind of darkness that presses against your chest, slowing your breathing until you're not sure where you end and the night begins. I couldn't move, not because I was frozen, but because I understood deep down that every step I took was being measured, judged, cataloged. Every glance I had stolen at the animals, every sound my body made, every beat of my heart was under observation. They weren't ordinary animals. They had never been ordinary. I took a hesitant step toward the barn, compelled by something I couldn't name. The air around me grew thicker with every movement, heavy with a metallic tang that made my stomach churn. The goats on the roofs shifted slightly, their eyes locking onto me, unblinking. The dogs and horses flanked me, forming a silent corridor that I was powerless to escape. And the cows, one cow, larger than the rest, stepped forward. Her eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, intelligent and patient, as if she had been waiting decades for me to arrive. I remembered Silas's warning, "Don't let them out." I had thought I understood before. I did not. The animals were already out. They were never confined. They were never meant to be confined. And I was never meant to leave. The barn doors creaked open slowly, as though inviting me in. Inside, shadows moved. Shapes that were neither human nor animal flickered in the corners of my vision. I felt the rhythm of their presence in my chest, a counting, a warning, a silent proclamation of my trespass. I wanted to turn back, to retreat to the safety of the house, but something in the air, in the ground beneath my feet, in the deliberate stare of the cow, compelled me forward. Then I heard it, my name, again, not whispered, not called, not spoken aloud, but sounded from inside my mind, soft and deliberate, repeating over and over, echoing with a cadence that made my teeth ache. I did not respond. I could not respond. Any movement, any sound, any thought might be enough to seal my fate. I stepped fully into the barn. The air was damp, thick, alive. The smell was iron and decay, yet somehow familiar, like it had been waiting for me. Shapes moved silently in the shadows, tall and thin, twisting forms that seemed to combine the features of animals and humans, yet defied every law of nature I had known. My flashlight trembled in my hand, though I tried to steady it. The light flickered briefly, casting long, impossible shadows across the hay-strewn floor. The cow followed me inside, stepping softly but deliberately. Her presence filled the space, her gaze drilling into my mind. I realized then that the farm wasn't alive in the conventional sense. It was sentient, conscious, and the animals were its instruments, its observers, its enforcers. And I I had trespassed, ignored the unspoken rules, and walked willingly into its domain. Hours passed in a blur. I couldn't measure time. The shadows stretched and warped, the whispers intensified, repeating my name, dissecting my thoughts, unraveling my will. And then I understood. The animals, the barn, the field, the entire farm, they were a single entity, a consciousness older than the town itself. The rules weren't warnings, they were instructions. They were procedures for survival or failure, and I had failed. I felt coldness crawl into my spine as I realized the truth. The farm was not a place of living creatures. It was a ledger, a book of names, and I was now recorded. Every person who had come before me, every soul that had wandered these fields, all had been observed, catalogued, and claimed. I could see the names in my mind, like ghosts written in invisible ink, waiting for the right eyes to mark them permanently. The cow moved closer, her hooves silent on the hay-covered floor. I tried to back away, but my legs refused. The other animals closed in, forming a ring. The shadows inside the barn shifted, coiling toward me, and I realized they were aware of me as well, not just the livestock, but something older, something patient, something relentless. A low, guttural sound emerged from the depths of the barn, resonating through the walls and into my chest. It was neither human nor animal, yet both. I understood instinctively this was not a sound to flee from. It was an assessment. My mind screamed, and yet I could not move. Then, in the corner of my eye, I saw the register on a hay bale. The page was open, names written in pencil, some fading, some fresh, and there it was, my name, written lightly at first, then darkening as if ink were spreading through the fibers on its own. My pulse hammered in my chest. I reached toward it, but the cow's gaze held me in place. It was not just observing now, it was deciding. I understood finally that there was no escape. The farm had claimed me long before I realized it. Every glance, every step, every breath had been noted, and now the ledger would mark me fully. My name darkened, my fate sealed, and I became another shadow, another witness, another silent observer for the next unsuspecting visitor. The first rays of sunlight reached the horizon, but they could not touch me. I remained surrounded, watched, marked. The animals returned to their positions, still and silent, but their presence remained heavy, omnipresent. The shadows in the barn faded into indistinct forms, yet their awareness lingered, reminding me that nothing here belonged to the living. The cow stepped aside, not out of mercy, but because its purpose had been fulfilled. I was no longer alone in the ledger. My mind carried a mark, a memory, a warning, and even as the farm returned to its deceptive calm, I knew I could never leave. The animals roamed free in daylight, grazing, wandering, appearing ordinary, but at night, the true nature of the farm revealed itself, its consciousness, its will, its judgment, all orchestrated by the creatures that were never just animals. And I, like those who came before me, was part of the tally, another name written, waiting for the next cycle, the next visitor, the next mistake. Some farms are quiet, some farms are still, some farms are never closed. Gray Hollow Farm is one of them, and it will always wait, always watch, always claim.